Lovelies, my name is Jessica and welcome to Makeup Misfit, and today I am bringing back a video that I quietly abandoned last year, and that was my Pan That palette in order. Now if you watched the 2 or 3 videos that I had on it, I was working on the Patrick Ta Major Dimensions palette. I had hit pan in the first shade, hit pan in the second shade, which were both shimmers. I was working on the third shade, which is a matte shade, and I did tend to put the palette down sometimes a little bit more and sometimes for a little bit longer than I was actually planning. A few months had gone by. I picked the palette up once again, used it once, maybe twice, put it down for another time, and I have not picked it up since. So with that, I'm thinking that that's just not a palette that is good for this project for me. So I did want to kind of bring this back. But I wanted to find a palette that I was going to be excited about, which right now I am, and I'm hoping that continues throughout the year. But something that I thought I could more so easily incorporate into looks. This is definitely a companion palette, at least for me. I don't have a whole lot of them, I don't think. I'd actually have to sit down. I do plan on going through my palettes and doing my collection stuff pretty soon. So I'm actually kind of curious to see how many companion palettes I have in my collection, or what I would consider as a companion palette, because sometimes I'm not able to create a whole lot of looks with those. I look at it and I'm just kind of confused. And I think that this is a palette that I can easily pull the one shade that I'm working on at that time into another look, whether it be a lower lash line color or an inner corner or something to just kind of give it a little pop of something. Now, if you don't know what Pan That palette in order is, basically you are just panning a palette, but you are going in order from the first shade in the palette to the very last shade in the palette, and you're just focusing on one at a time. Once you hit pan in that one shade, then you move on to the next and so forth until you have finished the palette. Now, that does not mean you don't, you can't use the rest of the palette with that shade that you're currently focusing on. You absolutely can. You're just focusing on that shade to hit pan on, and then you're going to focus on the next shade, but use the palette as you wish. I more so will probably be doing that a few times. And I will explain a little bit more later, but I will probably just be focusing on the one shade that I'm currently panning and incorporating that into other looks. Now, this palette has only been used for sure one time before. I actually used it with you guys on camera, and I may have tried to use it one time before that, but I don't even think I did that. So the palette that I am going with, and yes, call me crazy because it's going to be in here for the long haul, is my Natasha Denona Pastel palette. Now, I use this in a palette bingo with Amy Melissa. So the shades that have use on them are only 5 of them in this palette. And those shades, when I do end up reaching them and focusing on them, I'm probably going to go back and see the shades that she had given me, the look that I created, and I will probably pan that look most of the time when I'm focusing in on those shades. So I will be wearing more or less the same look for for 5 of these shades, but we'll have to see how I feel too. I'm definitely going to try and switch things up, but that's for a later time. So this is what my palette currently looks like, and just by first glance, well, you can see that there's usage in these 2 shades and some in here, but just at first glance, it's not a palette that I can easily pair together. So like I was saying, it would be easier for me to just pick the one shade I'm working on and throw it on my lower lash line and incorporate it into another look. Now, I don't really do lower lash line colors too much. I don't put those into my looks because for me, I have small eyes, and I feel that sometimes when I am putting a lower lash line or doing my lower lash line with a color, whatever it may be, it kind of closes up my eyes a little bit. Sometimes I don't like how it looks, and I really have to blend it out so that it's barely visible. As long as I know it's there, that's all that matters. Other people don't have to be able to actually see it, but I will still be counting that as a use if that's what I decide to do and not like it. But we'll just have to see how it goes. So this is hopefully a palette. I know it's going to be in here for a while, but hopefully I will be able to get some good use on this sooner rather than later. And I'm hoping that it's not going to take a couple of years, but we're going to have to see. I'm excited to eventually get to the shade. Not only does it already have the use on it, but I can definitely use that as an inner corner. This can be an inner corner in some sort of way. This one, a transition shade. This one I was a little intimidated by, but I think if I pull that shade by summertime or sometime around that time. I think this would be pretty over the lid. This one's a little intimidating, and this one as well in a way, so I can kind of like maybe use that on the lower lash line, something along those lines. But I think like this one I can use in the crease. This one I can find something for. Like I can pull these in. And I'm excited to just show my Natasha palettes a little bit more love. I have a few. The only one that actually has any pan in it, and it's only one single pan, is my Sunrise palette, which was my level 1 palette for Project Level Up last year. And none of my other palettes from Natasha Denona have any pan in them. Most of them don't even have any use in them. So I felt like I wanted to somehow pull Natasha's palettes into some of my projects this year, and I think that this is going to be a good way to do that, at least to start off. Hopefully I can keep up the excitement for this palette throughout this whole year and until every shade in this palette has pan, because that's ultimately the goal. And hopefully I don't abandon this one once again, but we're going to see how this goes. We're going to give it another shot. And that is pretty much it. So I'm curious if you have hit pan in a Natasha Denona palette, any of the shades, matte and or shimmers. How long did it take you? And if you've hit pan in both, what was the difference, like the usage difference between shimmer to matte? Because obviously shimmers don't take as long as mattes do. They're not as difficult. And the one pan that I have in my Sunrise palette is a shimmer shade. Now, what I wasn't doing with my Major Dimensions was keeping track of how many uses are like it took me to actually hit pan. I will try with this one. I am curious. And then I can always tack on that one extra use from those 5 shades that I had in my palette bingo last year. Because I am curious, since this is practically a brand new palette, how long it's going to take, especially since they are harder. It's just something that I'm curious about. So if that's something that you're interested in, let me know down below and I can definitely do that. Try and keep track best that I can and let you guys know when I do hit pan, or, you know, in the middle of doing that at my updates, where I'm at and how many times I've used them that far. And I will definitely try to remember to do that because I'm for sure curious about it anyways. So that is it. That is all. So hopefully this project works out this year. I am excited about it. I know I wasn't sure about doing pan that palette, but I think that this is kind of a nicer way to do it instead of feeling like I have to hit pan in every single shade in a palette at some point. Working on one shade at a time just kind of takes that stress off. And if it takes longer than a year, it's going to take longer than a year. And I'm not too concerned about it, only because I know Natasha's are more difficult. If it was an easier palette, I would probably try to get it done within the year, but I'm not going to put that stress or that focus on myself. Go in one shade at a time, and I'm going to try to incorporate each shade when I'm focusing on it into as many looks as I possibly can while it's in the project. So I'm really hoping that if I can get some really like constant use on every one of these shades while I'm focusing on it, that it's not going to take me as long to hit pan, if you know what I mean. So we'll just have to see how it goes, but I'm excited to get some use on this palette. And that is it for now. So if you're curious about this, please stay tuned for the updates and see how it goes. And that is it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys later. Bye.